Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Sunday, May 11th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. It's looking like a warm and pleasant day in Riverside. Expect a high of 85.2 degrees, perfect for any outdoor plans, with the low tonight dipping to around 70.1 degrees. And a very special Happy Mother's Day to all the incredible mothers listening and being celebrated today. Coming up on the show, we'll take a closer look at the debate around suspending habeas corpus, examining why this measure might not actually accelerate the deportation process as some believe. We will also explore the reasons behind the current gold frenzy that has U.S. jewelers buzzing. All this and more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. We're starting this morning with some deeply concerning reports. The Trump administration is reportedly considering suspending the constitutional right of habeas corpus to expedite migrant deportations. Joining us to unpack this is our news reporter, Ethan. Ethan, what's the core of this proposal?
Grace, according to sources including Fortune and U.S. News and World Report, the administration, with Stephen Miller reportedly involved, is exploring using the Constitution's, quote, invasion, end quote, clause to suspend habeas corpus. They frame the migrant influx at the U.S.-Mexico border as such an, quote, invasion, end quote, aiming to speed up deportations, as the Los Angeles Times reported on May 10th.
For clarity, Ethan, what is habeas corpus and why is its potential suspension so significant?
Habeas corpus from Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution protects against unlawful imprisonment by allowing a court challenge to detention. Suspending it, which the Constitution allows only, quote, in cases of rebellion or invasion, when the public safety may require it, end quote, removes that immediate judicial check. It's a fundamental right, Grace, and its suspension is no small matter.
Has this extreme measure been used often in U.S. history? It sounds like something pulled from the emergency playbook.
Very rarely. U.S. News and World Report and the Los Angeles Times note its use during the Civil War by Lincoln and in specific territories during conflicts. Importantly, the Los Angeles Times pointed out the Bush administration didn't suspend it after 9/11, and the Supreme Court, in Boumediene v. Bush, later affirmed detainee rights to challenge detention, a point Perplexity API sources also highlight, underscoring judicial oversight.
The quote invasion end quote claim is central here. Does a migrant influx meet that constitutional definition? It sounds like they're really stretching the dictionary, perhaps hoping the legal definition is more elastic.
That's the crux of the legal debate, Grace. Perplexity API indicates legal scholars and groups like the ACLU argue, quote, invasion, end quote, historically means military attacks or large-scale armed incursions by foreign powers, not migrant movements, however unauthorized. They say this redefinition stretches the framers' original intent and that suspension is for truly existential threats, not as a tool for immigration policy.
And who has the authority to suspend it? Is it solely a presidential power, or does Congress need to weigh in?
That's highly contentious. The Los Angeles Times and Perplexity AP, I note many scholars believe it's a congressional power, citing Chief Justice Taney's ruling in Ex parte Merriman back in 1861. While the Constitution isn't explicit, a strong consensus suggests significant judicial and legislative oversight is needed, not unilateral presidential action. It's a power that many believe shouldn't be concentrated in one branch.
So, if they proceed, legal battles are inevitable? This plan might find itself, quote, detained, end quote, in court for quite some time.
Absolutely, Grace. U.S. News and World Report and the Los Angeles Times remind us that federal courts have previously shown skepticism and blocked some Trump administration immigration policies. Challenges would likely target that definition of, quote, invasion, end quote, the separation of powers and fundamental due process. The administration, as the Los Angeles Times notes, might argue the Immigration and Nationality Act limits judicial review, but U.S. News and World Report suggests most appeals would still ultimately reach the judiciary.
But would this actually speed up deportation significantly, Ethan? Or is it a constitutional gamble for what might be a marginal gain in processing time?
That's a critical question. Perplexity API raises. Expedited removal laws already exist for rapid deportations of certain non-citizens, particularly those apprehended near the border, with limited judicial review. Legal analyses, as of today, May 11th, suggest the primary effect of suspending habeas corpus would be to bypass judicial review for the detentions themselves rather than achieving substantially swifter lawful removals. It wouldn't inherently solve logistical bottlenecks like processing capacity or international cooperation for repatriations, as Perplexity API also points out.
So what's the administration's specific issue with habeas protected rights if expedited removal is already an option? Are they trying to quote habeas, end quote, their cake and eat it too, when it comes to due process?
That's a clever way to put it, Grace. Proponents of the suspension, according to Perplexity API, identify those very habeas-protected rights, such as access to a neutral judge to determine if a detention is legal, and the right to challenge the basis of that detention as the main obstacles to even faster deportations than what expedited removal currently achieves. They believe these judicial review mechanisms are a significant impediment to their deportation objectives, though Perplexity API also notes that the specific scale of migrant cases impacted by these habeas-protected obstacles wasn't explicitly detailed in these recent May reports.
So even if they managed this constitutionally fraught step, the practical deportation challenges, the nuts and bolts of the system, would largely remain?
Yes, that seems to be the assessment. Perplexity API details that administrative issues like processing capacity, meaning enough facility space and personnel, the existing backlogs in courts for any remaining administrative reviews, and the sheer complexities of securing international agreements for accepting deportees would persist. In essence, as Fortune, U.S. News and World Report, the Los Angeles Times, and Perplexity API all report, this is a highly controversial move with profound constitutional questions, and, according to many experts, a debatable practical impact on the actual speed of lawful deportations.
A very serious situation with many layers, and one that could redefine some fundamental American legal principles. Ethan, thank you for shedding light on this complex issue for us this morning. It seems all that glitters these days is causing quite a stir in the U.S. jewelry market. Widespread economic jitters and soaring gold prices are fueling a real frenzy. Here to help us sift through the details is our news reporter, Chloe. Chloe, what's the situation on the ground, or rather, in the display cases?
Grace, it's certainly a dynamic situation. Reports from ABC News and the Associated Press paint a picture of intense activity, especially at places like the St. Vincent Jewelry Center in Los Angeles, which is the largest jewelry hub in the country. Jewelers, refiners, and what are known as assayers, who are specialists that test the purity of gold, are seeing a major surge in customer traffic.
A surge in traffic? Are people rushing to buy, or are they looking to sell, given these high prices?
It's actually both, Grace. According to ABC News and the Associated Press, many individuals are flocking to sell or even melt down old jewelry, including cherished family heirlooms, to capitalize on these high gold prices and get some quick cash. But at the same time, others are actively buying gold. They see it as a safe haven asset to protect their wealth amidst concerns about inflation and the volatile stock markets, as also noted by sensationalize.com. The demand is so high that businesses selling gold bars are reportedly struggling to keep them in stock.
It sounds like a modern-day gold rush. What's behind these sky-high gold prices? They must be truly worth their weight.
They certainly are. Analysis from Perplexity API indicates that gold has surged over 30% since early 2023. Just this month, by early May, gold was trading around $3,318 per ounce, and it even hit a high of $3,333.86 per ounce on May 9th. Market experts, cited across ABC News, the Associated Press, and sensationalize.com, are predicting these prices could continue to climb, potentially reaching $4,000 to $5,000 per troy ounce by the end of the year if this economic anxiety persists.
So this economic anxiety is the main driver? What specific factors are making people so nervous?
It's a combination of things. General inflation fears and geopolitical tensions are definitely playing a part, as reported by ABC News and the AP. But significantly, President Trump's recent tariff announcements are a major contributor, according to Perplexity API.
Tariffs, that's interesting. Are these new tariffs specifically on gold imports?
That's a great question, Grace. Perplexity API clarifies that these tariffs are not levied specifically on the importation of raw gold, gold bullion, or gold jewelry. Instead, they are broad-based measures. A baseline 10% tariff on all imports became effective on April 5th. Then, higher tariffs were imposed on goods from countries with significant trade deficits with the U.S., effective April 9th. Furthermore, a steep 125% ad valorem tariff, which means it's a percentage of the item's value, was applied to goods from China, Hong Kong, and Macau starting April 10th. And other countries listed in Annex 1 of Executive Order 14,257 face a 10% duty rate until July 9th, which is now just 59 days away.
If the tariffs aren't directly on gold, how are they pushing gold prices up? It sounds like an indirect effect.
Precisely. Perplexity API explains that these tariffs have roiled financial markets, disrupted global supply chains, and heightened fears of stagflation. For our viewers, stagflation is that unwelcome combination of stagnant economic growth and high inflation. This turmoil naturally increases the appeal of gold as a traditional hedge and safe haven asset. The Trump administration's firm stance on maintaining these tariffs, despite the market turmoil, has further contributed to sustained upward pressure on gold prices.
It sounds like a real double-edged sword for U.S. jewelry merchants then. Some must be having a golden opportunity, while others are feeling a heavy burden.
That's a perfect way to describe it. As Semazarian.com reports, gold refiners, assayers, and those facilitating the buying and selling of gold are experiencing a boom. However, ABC News and the Associated Press highlight that many other jewelers, particularly those who import finished products or rely heavily on gold as a primary material, are facing considerable financial pressure. Their operational costs are escalating due to both the record high price of gold bullion itself and these newly imposed tariffs on a range of non-gold inputs. Perplexity API identifies these affected inputs as including jewelry manufacturing equipment, display materials, non-gold components like gemstones, and even packaging materials.
With all those rising costs, I imagine customers are seeing higher price tags. Is there any talk of sticker shock?
Absolutely. ABC News describes it as customer, quote, sticker shock, end quote. Jewelers are caught in a tough spot, trying to manage these increased costs, which inevitably get passed on to consumers. Amidst this, Semazarian.com also notes that some jewelers are making efforts to preserve historically significant pieces from being melted down, which is a poignant detail in this whole scenario.
It's a complex balancing act. When you compare the financial impact of the soaring gold price versus these new tariffs on other supplies, which one is hitting jewelers harder?
Economic analysis from Perplexity API suggests that the direct surge in the price of gold bullion, the primary commodity for most jewelers, likely has a more substantial proportional impact on their total operational costs and profit margins. While the tariffs on items like equipment and gemstones certainly add to operational overheads, gold itself typically represents a much larger portion of a jewelry piece's cost. Traditionally, gold and platinum jewelry can carry profit margins ranging from 50% to 300%, but these margins are highly sensitive to such significant shifts in commodity prices and operational expenses.
Looking at the bigger picture, the U.S. jewelry market was valued at nearly $80 billion last year. What's the outlook now with all this turbulence?
Perplexity API indicates that the U.S. jewelry market, valued at $78.40 billion in 2024, had been projected for growth. However, the current economic climate, characterized by these high input costs and potential consumer pullback due to higher prices, could certainly temper those expectations. The outlook for gold itself remains bullish, driven by ongoing economic instability and continued demand from central banks. This suggests that U.S. jewelry merchants will need to continue navigating these challenging market conditions, marked by high price pressures and volatility throughout 2025.
A truly multifaceted issue, with a lot of sparkle and stress. Thanks so much, Chloe, for mining through all those details and giving us the golden nuggets of information this morning.
Anytime, Grace. Glad I could shed some light.
Here are some other headlines. Tensions remain high between India and Pakistan. A ceasefire agreed to on May 10th, following U.S.-led talks to de-escalate weeks of military confrontations, was almost immediately fractured. Both nations accused each other of violating the agreement just hours after it was announced. The initial confrontation began after a mass shooting at a tourist site in Indian-administered Kashmir on April 22nd, which left 26 civilians dead, mostly Hindu Indian tourists. Despite the ceasefire, heavy exchanges of fire were reported overnight between Indian and Pakistani troops along the line of control. Pope Leo XIV had welcomed the initial ceasefire agreement, expressing hope for lasting peace. The dispute over Kashmir, which also involves China, continues to be a source of instability. Meanwhile, in the Ukraine conflict, President Volodymyr Zelensky has welcomed recent diplomatic overtures from Russia as a quote, positive sign, but insists that a full, lasting, and reliable ceasefire must precede any peace talks. He urged Russia to confirm such a ceasefire starting May 12th. However, Russian President Vladimir Putin rejected an immediate ceasefire, instead proposing a resumption of direct talks in Istanbul on May 15th without preconditions, suggesting a ceasefire could be agreed upon then. This comes after leaders of 4 major European countries issued a unified call for Russia to accept an unconditional 30-day ceasefire, threatening escalated sanctions if Moscow refuses. Flare-ups in fighting have occurred even amidst these diplomatic efforts. Turning to U.S. politics, before Democrats name a 2028 presidential nominee, the party will have to decide which state will weigh in first. Discussions are ongoing regarding the schedule for the presidential primaries. Ray Buckley, chairman of the New Hampshire Democratic Party, is pushing to restore New Hampshire's status as the first-in-the-nation primary. Democrats in Nevada are also making a bid to host the first primary. Party officials have indicated that the 2024 calendar, which saw South Carolina go first, will not be used in 2028. And from the Vatican, Pope Leo XIV, the newly elected leader of the Catholic Church and the first American pope, used his first Sunday noon blessing on May 11th to address pressing global issues. He called for a just and lasting peace in Ukraine and an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, also urging the release of hostages and the delivery of humanitarian aid. Referencing current global conflicts as a, quote, third world war in pieces, he concluded his address by wishing all mothers a happy Mother's Day. The previous day, May 10th, in his first formal audience with the College of Cardinals, Pope Leo laid out his vision for the papacy, identifying artificial intelligence as one of the most critical challenges facing humanity. He drew parallels between the AI revolution and the Industrial Revolution, highlighting AI's impact on human dignity, justice, and labor, and stated the Church must actively engage with its implications. He also committed to continuing the reforms of the Second Vatican Council and the inclusive mission of Pope Francis. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 3.7, Gemini Pro 2.5 Experimental, Gemini Flash 2.0, Perplexity Sonar, Perplexity Sonar Pro, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.